A couple of stories about John first. I played golf, and I was playing golf up at Oberon, and I did one of John's poems, and this bloke came up and said, "That John Dengate," he said, "did he go to school?" And I said, "Yeah, he's trying to go to school with him." I said, "Oh." So I got his name. I came, rang John up, I said, "John, I met this bloke you went to school with." I said, "Here's his phone number." He said, "He'd be keen for you to give him a ring, you know." He said, "I don't think so, Peter." I said, "Why?" He said, he's the kid I took the book off." He probably never did get the call. I had the great pleasure of taking John out to Annandale for the John O'Brien Festival. We stayed at a friend of mine's place at Carcool, and it was actually Fagan's old house from the Ugara Gold robbery. It was a house he built that my mate bought. So John loved it and he had a great old time. So the next morning we drove off to Annandale, and we got to where Henry Lawson was born, Grenfell. And I said to John, "Do you want to go and have a look at the spot where Henry Lawson was born?" John said, "Oh mate, that'd be great." So we called him a memorial there, so took a few photos, got back in the car, and John said, "We can't very well leave Grenfell without having a beer for Henry, can we?" I said, "No, John, no. We couldn't possibly do that." So we went into Grenfell, had a beer, got back in the car, off I drove again. It was a bit like Jason's story. I was about 5 minutes outside of West Wyalong, and John said to me, "We must know somebody was born in West Wyalong." Anyway, here's, John wrote all these wonderful political songs and poems, and quite often the poem or the song will die with the poet, but John's was so good that they never did, and I think this one will outlive both the politicians that he wrote about. I won't say what it's called because it becomes fairly obvious. You can sit there and look patronising. You can sneer with your upper lip curled. If I'd have been Tony Blair's mother, we'd live in a much safer world. I'd have carefully monitored friendships that my little Tony might forge. I'd have warned him, keep out of bad company, and I don't want you playing with George. Like his father, he's far too aggressive. He'll just get you into a fight. And Tony, I know I can't help it, but George is not very bright. So Tony, take heed of your mother. I warn you, you're risking a smack. If you don't take to heart what I'm saying, wash your face and stay out of Iraq. It's not a suitable playground. No matter what Georgie might say, he's just a dumb little bully with whom you're forbidden to play. Now Tony might turn on a tantrum, the way lots of naughty boys do. I want to play soldier with George. Don't have to listen to you. But I'd have been firm and insistent. A good mother doesn't give in. I'd have known for the sake of the planet that this was a fight I must win. If I'd have been Tony Blair's mother, Tony would not be so glib. He'd be just a little more thoughtful and less prone to fudge and to fib. He'd be less inclined to go soldiering, to toady, to power and wealth. He'd stay home and fix up the railways, the schools and the national health. He'd have learned a bit more about Bevan and old Labor leaders before. And he wouldn't be mixing with George Bush, and he wouldn't be going to war. I ran into John at Gulgong Festival there one day on New Year's Eve, and in the pub about 3 o'clock, we had a few drinks with him and a few more drinks, and we were supposed to do a concert in the main street that night, and John didn't show up. And the next morning at the poet's breakfast, somebody said to John, what did you last night? Where did you get to? And he turned around, he glared at me and he said, I fell into some very bad company. So here's a lovely poem he wrote about his father, called Australian Made. I'm sure you all know, but for those who don't, the lights around the colonnade of the old GPO in Sydney were made by John's father. He mentions it in his poem. So next time you walk down Martin Place, look up at the colonnade of the old GPO and you'll see John's father's handiwork. My father worked in a factory, and the sheet steel came from BHP, from a rolling mill near the Hunter's Mouth, or a Kembla furnace further south. The steel was all of the highest grade, and every inch was Australian made. Copper and bronze my father wrought. The skills he possessed could not be bought. To his trade and his union he was true. That was a life my father knew. When his faults in heaven the angels weighed, they found they were all Australian made. The old stone GPO still stands, displaying the craft of my father's hands. I gaze with pride and my heart responds when I see those fittings shaped in bronze. My father's work to the world displayed, and every ounce was Australian made. Through depression and war, he remained unbowed. He was kind. Oh, he was fiercely proud. Cant and privilege he despised. He was not a man to be patronised. He was not religious. He never prayed. His ethics were all Australian made. His speech had the twang of the gum tree vow. He watched TV with a brooding scowl. When the name of a town was mispronounced, he expressed disdain like a lion he pounced. His indignation was so keen, he threw his shoe at the TV screen. If we beat the Poms in a cricket test, joy would reign and our home was blessed. But if we lost, at the wall he'd stare. We all felt touched by his dark despair. In his youth he wielded the willow blade, and the runs he scored were Australian made. The only time my father cried was a night when old Ben Shifley died. When they buried Ben and the Dead March played, my father's grief was Australian made. My father's dead, are as his mates, with their hopes and fears, their loves and hates. Different values now prevail. What was sacred, now up for sale. For the global market requires free trade. But not me, mate. I'm Australian, mate. And we'll have a go at the last thing John wrote. Dale found this on his desk after we lost him, and I'm not too sure. What did we call it again? That's your. We just call it John's last verse. I'll see if I can get through this. The world is full of terrible things. The world is full of curses. Royal babies, queens and kings, out of tune, broken strings, bad, ill-written verses. We have to cope with government stealth. In vain we seek for answers. We have to cope with failing health, with corporate crooks who steal our wealth. We have to cope with cancers. Pommy bastards, spieling Yanks, the curses are unending. Half-blind batsmen, greedy banks, but still we stand in stubborn ranks for all that's worth defending. We won't surrender, won't give in. Although our hair is grey, we come from tough, rebellious kin. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. We go on, disobeying. John, thank you.